chirp.
Okay, guys, welcome. My name is Amber Aki Huang. I will give you guys a brief intro if you don't know me. It is quite odd hearing my own voice echoing in this room. Okay, so there's a lot of information to cover, so I want to get through this so that you guys have as much information jam-packed into it. There are a couple slides at the end that I encourage you to actually take photos of because there's a ton of information on them, and I don't think just me speaking will be enough. I think it's good to review it at the end. Okay, so a little bit about me. I started as a character designer in animation. I have been working now in the industry for about 8 years. And during that time, I also started to take on jobs as a toy designer. So now I have worked with all of these companies and work on a lot of these properties, either as a character designer or as a toy designer. And that's just to give you a little bit of background to be like, you know, there's some experience behind what I'm saying. I didn't just make all this stuff up. I think a lot of this stuff is actually intuitive. It's just that it's maybe never been brought forward in the package that I'm maybe presenting it as, right? It's more of a question. And a lot of people want to do similar things, and it's more of there's not enough information available because it's not a path that a lot of people have taken or spoken about, right? So I'm gonna get through this part. So the reason why I wanted to make this talk is because right now, especially in the animation industry and entertainment industry, it is maybe not the best. You know, there's definitely a lot of worry, there's a lot of insecurity, and I want to give you guys tools that actually help increase your value and increase your own confidence in yourself, right? Because while the studios may be having a tough time and we may feel like that's the nature of everything, it must all suck right now, I actually find that more and more indie artists are getting more power, right? Like just think about like if you guys know some of my friends like that do Chicken Nugget, Kira, you know, BuzzFeed Animation, Has Been Hotel, they all started as indie animation and that now they're considered mainstream, right? So there's more and more power going back to the artists, which I think is a great thing. And I'm hoping that a lot of these resources or my talk will help motivate you more to stay creative and to also figure out, hey, there are other opportunities I can make for myself. I don't need to wait for someone to give me permission, right? And so one of the things that I got told early on was, if you plant as many seeds as possible, the probability that some of them will bloom as opportunities is much higher, right, than if you never planted them to begin with. Now this talk, I'm hoping that I'll go over a brief like general idea of model packing, character design, and TV, but I'm hoping that this is something that maybe you guys already have general knowledge on, or it's something that you can look up more later on, because I want to get to the good stuff that's not available online, right? So this is for students, professional, interested, studying, or have worked in character design, prop design, or visual development, or you want to make cool shit. So a lot of these skill sets I've noticed, specifically in these professions, are very transferable. They're extremely transferable to other industries, and that's how I've actually been able to diversify without changing what I do. And in fact, it's actually made me a better designer. And then I will say, I'm primarily trained as a character designer, not a toy designer. So the advice I'm giving is going to be coming from an animation perspective. I know there are more like official pathways to toy design, so do take everything with a grain of salt. However, I do know that it works. Okay, so model packing really quick in animation is after you've made a character design, after you have your concept, you are now in production, right? And this is where you see your character turnarounds, you see your character color callouts or texture. This is the same for 2D or 3D. The whole reason these exist is it's an accurate way to provide a lot of visual information for third-party vendors to correctly build or animate a character from scratch. So basically, you are giving them the blueprints of what you want to make, right? And this is a very important idea. because it translates into anything, physical goods, digital goods, 3D, 2D, right? And usually they consist of clean orthographic turns. Those are front, side, 3/4, back, etc. They usually include color styling if it's 2D, texture callouts if it's 3D. Poses and special poses are usually included, but it's not that important for physical goods because usually they're not going to be posed a separate way. So I'm going to give some examples. I pulled these from the internet just because I'm under a lot of NDAs. This is from a film called Ernest and Celestine. It is a 2D French film. I love it. This is what you're most familiar with as a turnaround, right? You're used to seeing a character. They're either like in a T-pose or flat. This is from Song of the Sea. So standard, you guys have seen this before. This is always in art books. You've also seen color callouts, right? So this is where when the character is in a certain environment, you're gonna have these colors that are specific. And this I also pulled from the internet. This is an example of 3D, when you do a 3D character and you paint it and you're saying, hey, I want the metal to be like this shiny. I want it to be this textured. I want it to be like this kind of glow. You give a lot of visual information, right? So how does that translate into character goods? Your character design skill set, technically prop design and visual development as well, this is included, translates into character goods because you can use the exact same model packing and just change it into the goods. And I'll show you how. And I wanted to start off with giving you guys a little grounding. These are my sketches. They're absolutely terrible, but they're my sketches. This is how I design out designs. I'm like, yeah, this is about the vibe. That's pretty good, you know? So I think you guys are probably going to be all ranges of skills. They do not need to be good. The only thing your first design needs to do is exist. Your ideas just need to exist. That's all they need to do, right? So from then on, you can maybe flesh it out a little bit, right? This is exactly how you would do a character as well. Like, hey, here's some details I want to do. And also, little side note, I never show any of this artwork. You're allowed to take photos. That's why I'm showing it. So you guys are in for a treat because I've never shared any of this artwork. And like, I'm sure you guys have sketches like this in your notebooks, all of that, right? Little doodles, little notes. That's literally all it takes. This is what I turn into my manufacturers, right? Because this is visual blueprinting. And this is my very first, I think, like, plush toy design from 2017. So I'm a little, like, embarrassed to show it because it's definitely improved since then. However, I think it's very important to show you guys that this is where I started, right? So you have your classic turnarounds, you have your colors. That's it. That's how you start. And I think a lot of the misconception is that you have to know everything. You don't have to know everything. When you find your manufacturers or you work with these companies, they will do the patterning. You just need to show them what the final thing is. It's the same in animation, right? You don't have to figure out exactly how to rig a character, exactly how you're going to puppet it for animation. You just need to show them the style guide at the end. So a lot of these, I'm going to show you these examples of, like, you're going to do notes and stuff and change them, but the better model packing you have, the more information you give, the easier it is to make your goods. So those are the final outcome, right? It's actually pretty similar. And I think both of these only went through maybe 2 rounds of revisions. And that's very standard in animation as well. You would get like a design back or you get a 3D model back and you go, hey, those fingers are a little long, let's shorten it. That's exactly how it works. These are for my vinyl toys. So this is, you can tell from this is kind of like what my character design and when I do my work for animation studios, game studios, this is how I model pack it, right? The more concise, the more detailed, the more clean it is, the better. And this is a skill set that is, you can train it. So it has nothing to do with inherent like artistic skills. This is a technical skill. And a technical skill can be practiced, right? So it's actually not that hard. And I don't even 3D model these. And I'll give you resources of how I started out. But a lot of times When you find collaborators, when you find factories, they can model it for you. So you don't have to do everything, right? I think when you're trying to make character goods, thinking about all these unknowns, because it's so not talked about, can be very, very overwhelming, and you don't know where to start. You just need to start with a model pack, right? And you guys can all do that. You don't need fancy 3D programs. You can do it in Procreate. I'm gonna give you a couple examples of like, this is how it turned out. I think it's just good to show like, this is the artwork I did for it, and then this is what turned out. And it's actually not that many steps as you would think, right? So it's very, very viable. The hard part is coming up with your own ideas that you wanna make into this. For example, isn't this a texture call out? These are the patterns for my tiger deer cat. You don't even need to know Illustrator. You can turn these in as high resolution, like Photoshop files or Procreate files. It's always nice if you learn programs later on, but you can make do with what you have. If you don't even know Illustrator, sometimes it's okay because the factory can do it for you. A lot of times you just have to ask like, hey, I didn't have time to do this. Can you just vectorize it for me? And they'll be like, yeah, it's fine. Because they do want your business, right? So literally, this looks like something I would turn into a studio, animation studio. You have your front, you have your back, you have your top, and then you have your texture call out, which are the fabrics, right? So that's how it ended up turning out. And another example is, okay, this is a mochi plush. I wanted to share as much as possible, so I went a little picture heavy, because I think it's so fun. But this one's for the mochi plush, which is a giant plush. This looks exactly like animation 2D turnarounds. Oh, and I included a note process. So this one only went through one revision of notes. That's the first pass they gave me. And honestly, pretty good, because the more detail you give them, the better they can create your product. And I told them like, hey, let's not do this. I want it printed. I want the fabric printed so that gradient is there. And this is how it turned out. And I don't want to overwhelm you guys with all this stuff too, because it may look like I make a shit ton of products. I make 1 or 2 products a year, because when I was first starting out, I was also working full-time in the studio, and I just really wanted to put something with all my creative effort and heart into that would make me satisfied. And this is also part of why I'm very much for like investing in yourself, trying to figure out your own like what you want to make, because as fun as it is working for studios, you're still working for somebody. It's never really going to satisfy your own creativity, in my opinion. So it's good to take care of yourself this way. This is literally what my props would look like in TV shows, right? Like I'd be like, okay, I'm doing an envelope. Here's how it opens. And this is how I made my, these are my print holders. So all my prints are always the same size. So I thought it'd be really, really cute if they had a little envelope. So a lot of times I've noticed that, I'll give you a little detail. When I first started doing my own thing, I started doing events. I started going to animation industry events, or I would go to like Anime Expo, and I started getting jobs of people being like, hey, this is really cool. Do you do toy design? Or we have other freelance opportunities that are outside of animation. And I'm not sure why I thought this, but I think a lot of people can resonate, where I was like, oh shoot, if I take a job outside of animation, I might not be able to go back in. It's a very strange, like nobody ever said that to me. I just was like, oh no, am I out of the club if I take like a different job? You know, like it feels like I just got in and now there's other opportunities and I want to take it. Now that I look back with experience in the years that I have, and I'm like, actually, all of this made me a better designer. Because if it works in physical goods, it will work in 3D animation. Actually, you know why things are simplified the way they are now. You understand why you can't always have a ton of detail, because it won't read. It won't read. It's a lot of tiny detail. They can't even print that. So actually, it makes you an even better designer when you're designing for 2D or games. And when you spread your wings like that, the world's your oyster, right? Like anything works. I've done toy design. I've done like, if you guys know Reddit, my team worked on the Snoo character, their 3D character. So my entire team worked on translating their 2D character into the 3D alien. That's a really weird job. I did not think that a tech company would reach out to me to basically cutify their character and turn it into a really lovable, animatable character, right? And I have to thank my team for that because they did the heavy work. But that's what they sought me out for. And I never asked or marketed that. They just recognized the work that put into it. And I think that's part of the fun, is you never know. These opportunities will come to you. So, let me make sure. How are we on time? Okay. If there's time, I want to do a Q&A. Make sure you guys get enough resources. So, a lot of the questions I get from the get-go, and they're well-intentioned, is, who is your manufacturer? Where do you get these made? And that's a very good question. However, I think it's because the whole process is so mystifying, right? Like, even when I tell people my manufacturers, I have to tell them, hey, I speak Mandarin. I talk to my manufacturers in Mandarin. That's already going to be an issue for some people. Or like, there's something called a minimum order quantity, where if you're a bigger artist, sometimes you order like thousands of plush instead of hundreds. So a lot of companies will not take that then. However, these are all very beginner friendly, and I have used quite a few of these. So these are companies that do custom plush toys, custom stationery goods, keychains. They actually do way more than just this, but if I was to list it, it would never end. And the great thing about a lot of these companies is it does not matter your quantity. Obviously, the lower quantity you have, it might be a little pricier, but it's such a good way to get at least, like, even if you wanted to buy one of your plush toys to get a sample, right? And then the other one in black, Makeship. The reason it's in black is because this is one of the newer companies that have come out that is low risk, crowdfunded. It's not a Kickstarter. Not exactly a Kickstarter. They basically help you do pre-orders for your plush, help you do the sampling, and help you do feedback. And if it gets past like 50 orders or 100 orders, then your plush toy becomes a reality. So it's very, very low risk for the artist, because I think right now, everyone's coming from different financial situations, everyone's coming from different aspects. So I wanted to make it as easy to shoe in as possible. Right? Next one, designer toys. This is also a widely sought after question of like, how do you get started on toys? I'm gonna be honest, if you're going the professional route with a factory, it's very expensive. It's about the cost of a car, which is not good. However, the way that I started was honestly collaborating with artists who are like-minded and passionate. And there has never been a more, I guess, passionate time for artists to engage and collaborate. A lot of people have resin printers at home. I personally prefer resin printers because the quality is really good and you don't have to sand this up much. And they're in a really good price range. Like, there's 4K resin printers that start at $200. That's not bad, honestly, to be able to implement and try things out at home, right? And in my opinion, just trying it out, just starting, right, is way better than getting overwhelmed. There's so much information. The best way to learn is just to try. I tried, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I enjoyed it, and that's how I learned my pathway, right? But I don't think anyone ever gave me the exact path advice to get here, but a lot of people helped me with little bits of advice along the way. So a lot of the times, how it would start is you can get a resin printer, you can collaborate with a 3D artist, or you can also do 3D art on the iPad. There's Nomad, there's Blender, there's a new program called Womp 3D, which is very intuitive. You don't even need to know 3D. It's like connecting spears, and it automatically goes together. So there's a lot of resources out there. And then a lot of times, a lot of people will hand brush, or I will hand paint a lot of the stuff that I started with, right? And actually, these three artists are really, really, they have a lot of YouTube videos. They're very active on social media. They have a lot of breakdowns of the entire process. So these three artists, I would highly recommend. Plastic Cell is actually based in Anaheim, and they do everything in-house. Frank Monato is someone I met at DesignerCon, and he also does everything in-house and by himself, and he has a ton of really nice YouTube videos that break down everything step by step. The other one that I like is The Craftsman. That is how it's spelled. It's not a typo. And he's this very, very nice, charming Southern man who talks very, very nicely and talks about making toys in his garage. Okay, and they share a ton of tutorials. Okay, and then this one is, I think, a big question all the time is when you're ready, when you want to do, a little bit more mass order stuff, Alibaba is usually the first thing you hear of, right? And it's really confusing because it's honestly not organized well at all. It's very in your face. There's a ton of things. So let me teach you how to catch your fish now. You know what fish you want, but let me teach you how to catch them. So with a lot of these products, you can go on the filters, and this is not talked about enough because there's always a lot of risk involved, right? You don't want to do an order, and you hear all these horror stories of like, my order didn't come, or I got a bunch of B grades, or I got a bunch of C grades. You don't have to be okay with that. You can actually demand a refund because when you check this box, trade assurance, it's like Amazon being like, hey, you didn't like your product? It wasn't what they said? We'll back you on that. But if you don't check that, then sometimes it's the Wild West out there. And you can tell if they have trade assurance if they have the crown next to their name. And another thing to also put down is minimum order. That's what we call MOQ, your minimum order quantity. It could be anywhere from 1 to 100 when you're starting out, or 1,000, But that way, only the companies that actually do those orders, do small batch orders, will pop up. So you don't have to waste your time searching for it. And even a lot of these companies, if they're on Alibaba, they tend to have an English translator. They're usually pretty good. However, that's why I recommend reaching out to 2 or 3 of them, figuring out which one has better communication skills, honestly, and which communicate well to your liking. Some of them are very blunt, some of them are super friendly. I've been called beautiful by a lot of them. Or they call me love, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love this, right? And then my other advice is I only look for manufacturers that are 5 years or older. And this is because if they've got into any trouble, they won't be there after 5 years. So I am very wary of the ones that say 2 or 3 years. So I would recommend longer is sometimes better, 5, 7 years. The reviews don't count as much because I don't even review it. It's not like Amazon reviews, but it's like a good marker, right? So I recommend doing that. And when you have your model pack and you give it to them, what I would recommend is instead of going straight to like, hey, I want to order 100, you get one sample. The sample might be kind of expensive. We're talking anywhere from like $20 to $100. However, I do believe it's worth the investment to find a good factory because a sample tells you a lot. And I tend to do 2 or 3 samples from different vendors, right? And you'll realize that each one has a different flavor when you get them back, and then you get to choose that one. Just because you did a sample with them does not mean you're locked in, right? And I think that there's a lot of anxiety like, oh shoot, if I reached out to them, I don't want to be a nuisance. I want to like I got to do what they want me to do, right? This is untrue. They want American money. So they will be very willing to listen to you and do samples and revisions. One other thing that I will say, because I have lived in Asia, especially China, for a long time, we don't really do this in the US. You have to negotiate your price. Please do not take the price they tell you from the get-go. You are supposed to negotiate. They understand that you are an overseas person if you're talking in English, obviously, and if you're on Alibaba.com, because Alibaba.com is mainly for international. So when they give you a price, the easiest thing I do is, can you make it cheaper? That's literally what I tell them. And it sounds so rude, but it's not, I guarantee you, because of the currency exchange, okay? And they're also upcharging it quite a bit. So it's good to ask them that, kind of like when you go into an interview and they're like, we can pay you this much. And you go, pay me more, please. So it's at your own, whatever you feel comfortable with. Some people don't feel comfortable with that, right? Sometimes I say channel your ballsy friends, the ones that are like, yeah, give me a good deal. But that's totally part of it. And it's recommended to negotiate. They totally understand that. This is not like you being rude or like a Karen or anything, okay? One other thing. So I didn't go into this as much, but when you saw my model packing, basically, so the difference between 2D, 3D animation model packing is when you do your color callouts, they're just flat like color hex codes, or they're gonna be texture pictures. When you do physical products, most of the time the name that comes up the most is Pantone. Pantone is just kind of your standard like physical goods color chart. A lot of the factories or manufacturers all have this like basically key chart of colors. However, buying them is very expensive. And I also feel very gypped when they're like, hey, you have to change out your color cards every 2 years. Like, that's a lot of money. I think two of the things are like $500. That's a lot to change out for a lot of people every 2 years. However, they did create an app. I'm hesitant to advise this because it's not the best app. However, there are free trials and it is much more affordable and you get the entire collection. And one of the things I really like that saves me a lot of time is this is in a browser or it can integrate into PC. So like it integrates into Illustrator, integrates into Photoshop. You can upload your tech pack, your model call-out sheet, and it'll tell you what colors it should be. And you can just take that and it saves so much of the work, right? You might have like minor differences, but that was already going to begin with because you're not going to get the same color range in physical goods. That's why they have the Pantone. So they have fabric swatches, they have printed swatches, they have plastic swatches. Every library tells you what it is. So this is super, super handy for those starting out. And honestly, even though sometimes it gives me a headache, it's fantastic and I highly recommend it, and it's much cheaper than buying the books. I think that is actually everything. Thanks you guys for listening. If we have time for Q&A. So if you raise your hand, I think we'll have a mic that's passed out.
Hello, it was really great listening to your talk. My question is, currently I'm a full-time graphic designer, so often I struggle with, my professional work and then having time for all this extra work. So what is your recommendation to someone who wants to get into this but feels like they don't have the time? But I probably do, I just have bad management.
I am very on the borderline of this too because I am lazy. I don't technically want to do more work. I don't think any of us should actually overwork. This is a problem with a lot of artists. It's such a weird spot because I don't exactly like hustle culture. However, part of what I do is kind of hustle culture. I think it has to do with what you feel like your heart needs. That's honestly how I operate, where when I was working in the studios, the whole reason I started Dear Cat is because my soul was dying, to be frank. As exciting as it is doing commercial work, it is commercial work. And it is the same thing over and over again, which is really cool. Some people really like it. My brain likes a little spicy, likes a little challenge. So I started to do this because I could feel myself draining away, right? Like I found that if I set a goal for myself where it's like, hey, 1 product a year, that seems pretty manageable. And a lot of time it's not even sitting in front of a computer. It's just mulling around in your head where you're like, yeah, I really want to make a plush toy. That's actually how it started. Sometimes I'm a little bit very optimistic where I don't look and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make it. I'll figure it out as I go. And I think that that's honestly why this snowballed into what it is. However, I do want everyone to take care of yourselves. I don't think that you should overwork. I think your mental health is extremely important. So I would say that go with what your heart feels like. You shouldn't do it just because you feel like you should. And honestly, if you have a full-time job, that's quite a lot already, you know? I hope that helps.
Hello. First off, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really well done, really insightful. My question is going to be very businessy, just as a heads up. When you're starting out DearCat, how did you go about establishing yourself as a business? For example, did you have to apply the business as an LLC? Anything along those lines? Like when tax season comes around, for example, do you have to do anything regarding DearCat as you're getting additional income?
Yeah, I think for that stuff, I'm going to be a little haphazard with you. When you're starting out, I would say you don't have to think about that too much, because it's only when you're making a shit ton of money that you really want to start protecting yourself with an LLC. The only reason that I started my LLC, because it literally means limited liability company, and at that time I didn't own anything. So I couldn't lose anything. I didn't have assets, right? The only reason I started it is to protect myself when I started to do more bigger goods. Like, I didn't want a kid to choke on something and then be in an issue, right? But this is very, very far removed. And that was mainly because my stuff started to get sold at retail stores. That was when I made the decision, hey, I should probably make this a little bit more professional. You do not have to do this when you're starting out. Actually, I've talked to I actually love the sales and use case permit offices in California. They're really nice about it. They're super understanding with like artists and market events. I think the most important thing is actually to focus on making the thing first. A lot of the worries that come with it, like, hey, I gotta be a real business. I gotta that'll come later as the things motivate you to do it. Like you'll have motivations, but sometimes I think when that comes too early on, it stops you from even doing it, right? And then you've stressed over something that hasn't even happened yet. Yeah, so I think it'll come in due time, and then you can always, if it's doing that well, you can always hire a CPA, and then they can do it. Yeah.
Thank you for this presentation. It's really nice. I enjoy hearing it, and I also really love your work. I guess my question was for like when it comes to producing the plushies, for like fabric swatches, do usually the manufacturers like send you multiple different types of swatches for that? And as far as the coloring goes, do they dye it and stuff, or do you kind of like provide your own fabric as like examples on your sheets?
So actually, that's the really fun part, is when you start these manufacturing processes, a lot of the times how I figured out things is I just asked them dumb questions all the time. Like, I didn't know fabric types. I didn't know what a poly cotton blend is. I didn't know, like, do I want short pile? That's like the length of the fur. Short pile, long fur? I was just like, I like this mochi plush. Can we do something similar? And they just have the fabric, right? So as you go through it, that's the fun of it, though, is technically anything is possible. They can dye it for you. They can sublimate it for you. They can print on it. They can embroider for you. Actually, a lot of these factories are so well equipped. A lot of times, if I've started to really like a company, I'll tell them, hey, send me your cloth fabric swatch book. It's like a big binder with a bunch of fabric colors in it, especially if I know I like that fabric. Or you can actually even ask them, hey, I have like a really structured, like I want this plushy firm, I want this plushy stretchy. They'll recommend fabrics for you actually, because that's actually the beauty of it, is you don't have to know everything. But I hope that helps.
Yeah, I have two questions. That's me all the way in the back.
Oh, okay.
One, I was curious if you negotiate pricing with factories in yen or US dollars. And then another question, do you ever visit factories or have people visit the factories you're working with on your behalf?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first question? I didn't quite hear it.
Do you negotiate the pricing with factories in US dollars or yen?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so for the first question, yes, it's usually US dollars because actually the bank transaction works that way. So you have no choice but to communicate in US dollars, especially if you're gonna be on Alibaba, which actually that's a great segue because I forgot to say, only do your transactions on Alibaba. A lot of them will ask you, hey, do you have WeChat? Do you wanna do it through email? No, you must do it on Alibaba because then the Alibaba can go in the chats and be like, hey, you promised this. If you go off of the website, kind of like Amazon, if you if you buy something from someone else off of eBay or Amazon off of the website, it doesn't count, right? So if it's on Alibaba, then it's going to be in USD. And then regarding the factories, and if I've ever visited them, I mean, you can. However, I have lived in Shanghai and China for like 8 years in my youth. I don't think you want to visit them. It's honestly a lot. And a lot of the times what I ask for is a ton of photos, a ton of videos of the entire process. And to me, that's actually enough. You just want to make sure that things are working and things are in control, right? And a lot of times I haven't really had an issue if, like, I've never had a vendor, like, lie to me or, like, pretend they're working on something when they haven't, because they know they need to produce something, especially if you're only doing samples with them. Actually, that's the incentive to them to do a good job, is because then maybe you will place a big order, right? Or maybe you will work with them. So I haven't felt the need. I know people who do, but I'm lazy and I don't want to travel that way just to see a factory. So I don't know if that helps, but I think there's actually, you'll gain that confidence the more you talk with your manufacturers, the people you find. And obviously that trust will be built over time. The ones I like take a ton of photos for me, take a ton of videos, and they even like wish me happy birthday. So those are the vendors that you'll find that you'll probably gravitate towards more. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I actually have 2 questions. So the first one is for your color model sheets. Does it make a difference if you do them in like RGB or CMYK?
So let me think. If you're printing on paper goods, like say, for example, my envelopes and stuff, sometimes it's good to do CMYK. However, because China is so advanced in their machinery, actually they have some really good RGB printers. So it almost doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Which is why it's fun, actually. You can hand them something and they're like, yeah, we'll make it, we'll do it. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I've noticed is that sometimes it's good to have the color call out, like the Pantone color, because sometimes monitor colors are different. So if they're going off the monitor colors, sometimes it's hard. So even if it's printed, you can give them like, hey, this whole thing is red. This is the red it should be, so that they can actually be like, oh, okay, now we know what the color difference is.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. And then the other question I had was, I know this might not be the most like time-effective way, but like, do you think it's possible to make your toys like handmade, like clay toys, or like just like, you know, maquettes kind of?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's very, very possible. Actually, one of the guys that I listed in the resources, the craftsman, he makes his toys out of Sculpey. Because if you sculpt it, oh, that's actually great. You don't even need to 3D model. If you can sculpt it by hand, you can cast it in a silicone mold. And those guys that I listed are experts at that. They have like all these things of like, here's how you can like cast it, and then you can make more toys. It's actually really great because you can do a lot of things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, I hope this helps because you don't have to know everything. You don't have to do every part. You can figure it out on the way. You just need to know what you can do right now and where you want to go and what you want to make, and it kind of falls in place. It's kind of scrappy, but it falls in place.
Hi, I just wanted to say first thank you, because your talk meant a lot to me as somebody who is still in college and kind of figuring out like where I think I'm going to land. But like coming from that perspective, I'm wondering, because I'm assuming obviously a lot of people started this or like start a journey like this because they really want to take a break from their personal like full-time jobs. But is it possible to kind of start off with something like this, you know, like really kind of dive into that? Or is this something that people usually build up on the side while having like a full-time job to really sustain themselves? Because it is like a small business journey, right? So.
To give you a little history, not my dark past, but in college, I did a lot of anime events to pay for college. This is how I started vending. Has nothing to do with Dear Cat. It was all fan art, right? So I think it's actually that what gave me the little taste of like, hey, I like money. I like being able to make things and paying for art supplies and being able to have that confidence of like, people like this stuff, right? So I think being in college is fantastic. It's a great place to start. You do not need to be working full time. This is just how Dear Cat came about. But I have actually been vending way before that, being very, very scrappy. That's where I learn a lot of things, right? You have to start somewhere. So I also do encourage all of you to, if you want, try vending. You know, it could be a small farmer's market. It could be like LightBox Expo. It could be like Anime Expo. I think it'll give you a really great like taste of if you like this. And I think that if you start vending, actually, even with anime stuff, it'll actually curate your brain as to like, oh, I thought this would sell well, but actually the other thing sells well, right? And one other piece of advice I'll give is hard work does not equate connection. You can work really hard on a painting, and I know you guys work really hard on pieces sometimes, and it does not sell well. However, it's still near and dear to your heart. But it does not mean it's bad. It just means that in a business, sometimes the emotional impact, the easier it is to connect with an audience, the quicker the connect, sometimes the quicker the impulse. That's why stupid memes work really, really well. Not to discourage you guys, but it's just like, it's not you. It's just the nature of these things. And the more you know about it, the more you can use those tools to your advantage, right?
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was wondering, how would you, do you have any advice for any beginners who want to market their stuff, like on social media? Do you have any tips or anything like that? Or like how to deal with potentially if it doesn't work out and how to bounce back, basically?
I think for the most part, it's good to set your expectations, like not too low, not too high. I think as an artist in general, broadly speaking, you're always gonna have failures. It's gonna happen no matter what. You're gonna fail somewhere. It's inevitable because you're taking a risk. When you take risk, you will fail, right? But it does not mean that it is forever permanent. Failing is just a temporary situation, and you learn from your failures a lot more. I learn by being scrappy. I learn by making mistakes and being like, oh shit, I shouldn't have like done this product when I should have done that. But you will never know until you make that mistake, right? You don't get to choose when those lessons come to you. However, I think that social media is a very double-edged sword because it is a highlight reel of everyone's lives, right? Especially artists and stuff. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. Everyone's lives are being put and exaggerated, if you will, on social media, which is a great thing when it motivates you. It's a terrible thing when it starts to tear down your confidence, which tends to what happens, right? There's a phrase where it says comparison is the thief of joy. I think comparison is sometimes good to be like, hey, I want to be at that level, that's the goal. But when it gets too far, you're like, I'll never be them. I'll never be as skilled as them, etc. And I think it's really good to manage, like, you will never be the artist you look up to. That's impossible because they are the artists that you look up to. They already exist. You are your own person. So you will never be exactly 100% like someone else. You are your own person, and there's a ton of value in that, right? You have to bring the value back to yourself. And it can be hard. However, I believe that when you start putting things that are authentic, that you like, people will follow. I wouldn't get too caught up on like, oh, I wanted to like sell this many things, or I really wanted to do X amount of stuff. Sometimes that's fate. Sometimes that's just chance. You could be really good at something and it's just not, the audience isn't right. The timing is not right. And that's also a question to ask yourself, which is, to me, it's very important if it's making you happy. If it's not happy, if it's not good, I may, if nobody looked at my stuff, would I still make it? I would, because it makes me happy. It's very self-satisfying in that way. However, if nobody liked it, I would still be creating because the process is what makes me happy, right? And I think it's a little bit of that, of making sure that it's balanced. It's such a tricky edge to be on, right? But as long as you set your expectations and you have the right, I think the goals of, I think it's good to compare yourself to your previous year, how much you worked, or like how outgoing you've been, or other markers, right? Like how many times you drew or something. Something that's good to compare just to yourself, because you can only control yourself, right? So I hope that helps.
Hello. First off, thank you for sharing so much information, especially the Wild West that Alibaba seems to be. It's terrifying. So thank you for shedding light on that. I'm really curious, though. How long does the back and forth usually take? It seems like, you make an idea, you send it, then you find a manufacturer, you send them the idea, and then like shipping, they have to ship you a sample multiple times. I'm wondering what the timeline for all of this looks like.
Yeah, so actually that's a really great question, because whenever you first find a manufacturer or you start working with someone, I think that's the time when the first product you make takes the longest, because it's unknown. You're kind of getting the feel of the person communicating with you. You're sussing things out, right? So I would give yourselves, I'm bad at this, where I always think it's going to be way quicker than it is. Whatever you think it is, whether it be like a plush toy, it's good to say like 3 to 4 months at least when it's your first one, because there will also be a learning curve for you. You'll just learn things on the go, like, oh, shoot, sewing doesn't work like that. I can't make a hard edge. It's going to be a little lumpy. It's going to be a little soft, right? But I think give yourself plenty of time. Give yourself like 2 to 3 times as much time as you think, which is why I talk about like, I make 1 product or 2 products every year, because I like to think things through. And the more you become comfortable with your vendors, the quicker they are, right? The quicker they get you, they get your vibe, they understand what's important to you. Sometimes they don't understand what's important to you, so they're gonna do something completely different. But I would say that the bigger the product is, the more intricate it is. Like if it's acrylic keychain, sticker sheets, those are pretty easy to just do like within the month even, just a couple of weeks. But you'll start to get a feel of like how you like to do it. And as far as physical samples sending to you, I don't ask for physical samples until it's the final sample, because usually photos and videos are enough for me. And then that final sample being sent is when I check all the colors. Because for them to send me the samples too many times, it gets really confusing which sample we're on. So actually, just being able to do that, and then you do your final notes, and then that's usually how it goes. Yeah.
Hello. Oh my God, this sounds weird. Hello. Thank you for having this talk. It was very informative and enlightening. Appreciate it a lot. A question that I had, for like external manufacturers, kind of like the ones you mentioned in this presentation, the one of like low risk type stuff, I often find that some of them are kind of like low risk, but you kind of have to work with the manufacturer in the sense of having like specific like brand things on it. So my question is, how do you like balance keeping a manufacturer's design requirements if they end up clashing with like your final goal or your final vision, if that makes sense?
I think that does. I think you might be confusing with collaborative merchandise, which is different, where the brand is heavily involved in it. I have some like exclusive vinyl toys where they're exclusive to a certain store, and then that's where the branding would come into play. However, all of the resources I gave would only be your design. Yeah, they would help you through everything. Even Makeshift, the low risk crowdfunding, they don't own anything. They help you make the thing, but they only make it if there's enough like excitement for it, if that makes sense. But at least it gives you that foot forward without financial costs on your side. And they would help you with the sampling. And I do not think that they get any involvement on like the branding of it. I think they get a percentage of the sales, but that's about it, which is, I think, fair for what they're doing.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I am coming to this with the perspective of being an illustrator and a 3D character artist myself. And you had mentioned a couple times like collaborating with 3D artists for development, whether you're doing that for like a vinyl or for a plush. And I was curious, coming from the perspective of a 3D artist, how do you go about finding 3D artists to collaborate with?
Honestly, it's usually quite organic. Usually it's friends. It's friends or people whose work I like, and I'm like, hey, do you want to help me make this into a reality? It's at your own discretion, whether it's paid or not. Sometimes it's a passion project, right? There's not a lot of funds available. For me, I like to pay people for their work, and I tend to give them a credit as well. So on my vinyl toys, you can actually see the sculptor, because I don't think that that's enough credit given, and they are a big part of why my toys look good. Right? So it's to each their own, but generally it's about that collaborative element that makes a product really shine. It's a team effort. Animation's a team effort. Making stuff is a team effort.
Hi, thank you for going over this process, especially like sharing some of your resources and stuff like that. That's really appreciated. I was curious if you could kind of go over the timeline for your company, basically. Like when you made your first product specifically, and then kind of the evolution of that, realizing, oh, I need an LLC for this purpose, or oh, because you talked about having a team, and like how it went from being basically a one-person operation to evolving into what it is now, if you don't mind.
Oh, I do not at all. I'm glad you're interested in that. That is a little bit of the nitty-gritty. So I think, I can't remember my years, but I started Dear Cat in 2017, and I made the LLC during COVID. So it was 2020 when I finally decided to make it into the LLC. And it was exactly as it is, where I just started out like CTN, and I think only the first year of LightBox had existed in 2019. And honestly, I also started because I wanted to have my name out there that wasn't actually attached to a studio, because I felt like it was more meaningful for me to be recognized, my name to be recognized, without having to be like, hey, I'm a DreamWorks artist. Hey, I'm a Netflix artist. I didn't like having to say that, so I just say, hey, I make toys, I do Dear Cat. So I would say over the years, it's slowly gone into that. And actually, another reason why this became an issue is because I wanted, because I was working in pre-development at that time, there were some noses poking around about turning Dear Cat into a preschool show. So I wanted to make sure that I was established so that if it was on the negotiating table, I would look like a proper business. So it's honestly all due to that, and it's accumulated since then. And I would say only after COVID, in the last, what year is it, 2024? So 2021, I think we started doing events again. 2022, 2023, 2024 is when I started being more financially independent with the business, to where I could hire people to work for me, or hire people to, like a lot of my staff members are friends that I pay to help out because it is tiring work. But they also love Dear Cat, and they're all really, really engaged in, like, I always talk to them about like, oh, what toys I'm gonna make. They're like my soundboard. So I think that it's become very organic, and now it's just become bigger and bigger, where I work with official toy companies, producers, and it's just gone that way, right? But it's happened to where those opportunities presented it, and I went, hey, yeah, I like that, let's do that. I think the only thing when you're expanding out, when you get those opportunities, it's not always obvious. Just make sure your legal is tight. Make sure you can talk to an IP lawyer, sign your NDAs, make sure that it's good for you. Because a lot of the contracts you will get are not good for you. They're good for the party that's giving it to you.
Hi, I was wondering how you can go about creating your own vinyl toys. I'm really interested in something like that, and like possibly collaborating with like a brand like Pop Mart or something like that. I was wondering how you would go about that.
So actually, I have worked with Pop Mart before. This is a little bit of a loaded question because it's such a, when you get into the big brand business stuff, it depends on how you want to do it. There are so many different avenues, right? You could be an artist that Pop Mart hires. You can have an IP that Pop Mart buys, right? I like to hold all my rights, so that is actually why the collaboration with Pop Mart did not become a reality. So it's going to be what's more important to you. And with the vinyl toys, I think starting out with making the product is going to be a really great place. Because if you've never made anything before, it's hard to tell people like, hey, I am a vinyl toy artist or I am a toy designer without having designed a toy, because you're going to learn so much the first time you design something, right? But it's about starting out, designing something, just making that physical product. It could be hand sculpted, it could be crafted, you know? And maybe going to toy events, vending at toy events, or meeting people there. That's actually how the organic collaboration starts. And I think it's really good to have goals like, hey, I want to sell at like Hot Topic or Pop Mart or all that. But the way that it tends to go is when they see something that's getting a lot of attention, they're going to have a lot of attention. A lot of these shows, a lot of people tend to be undercover. Like they're always eyeing trends. They're always like, a lot of recruiters follow me on like Instagram and stuff. They're just like silently following, and you don't know. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes if they're actually following you. And sometimes I feel like the moment you ask them about it, they're like, oh, hold on, not yet, right? So it's more about putting yourself out there, authenticity. And I do believe that if you have those big goals, the more you invest in yourself, those goals will come true. Maybe not the way you thought it would, but it will come true.
Hi, thanks again for the panel. I was wondering, were you ever looking into producing posable toys and what kind of manufacturer you would go through for that? Because everything so far has been like static. And then I guess the second thing, where did you get your glasses? Because I've been looking for really large circular glasses for a while and I can't find them anywhere.
I can answer that. Actually, I'll answer your glasses question first. These are Ray-Ban glasses. They're actually sunglasses. They're specifically Ray-Ban Japan because they're for little Asian faces with no nose bridge. But they look wonderful on everyone. They're sold in the Ray-Ban stores in the US. They're just marketed as sunglasses. I think it's like R95392, something like that. But I only say that because I've literally bought the same pair in different colors over like 8 years. That's why I've been like, yeah, the Harry Potter glasses. Anyways, I highly recommend. Okay, I spaced out. What was your first question again? Oh, okay, posable figures. So actually, I think I've just never thought about posable figures as something I wanted to do just yet. I think it's totally possible. So one of the factories, not factories, but one of the people that I'm talking about, Plastic Cell, I do think they have posable figures. There's a lot of people who do ball jointed figures as well. I think it's more of like, why not? I could if I wanted to. I think the only thing is the more parts you have, the more molds you have. The more molds you have, the more you have to paint and put them together. So that's the only factor. There are a lot of people who do small posable, I guess the Deer Cat toys are kind of posable. The tail spins, the head spins, although that's not by design. That's just how the joint is made. So I think it's totally possible. I think it's super cool. And I think that whatever you like is totally possible, because the more you think about it, I love problem solving that. If it doesn't exist, you can make it exist, right? So I would definitely look into ball jointed dolls, because there's a ton of makers for that at least. That might give you at least a start. And I think this is going to be the last question.
Sorry, I did not think that was going to happen. Hi, I'm Shaun. Thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask how you kind of keep yourself organized with everything, like when you're communicating with the factories. Like, I don't want to be the person that's like, as per my last email, like this is what I said. But not just keeping them like in terms of like deadlines, but like yourself with, I need to get this by this time, I need to communicate with this person, like how do you do that?
I think that's also going to depend on if you're a type A or type B. I think like type A is like really strict, right? Like schedules, deadline, everything. I think type B is where you're like, whatever happens, happens. I would say I'm a combo. I have been forced to be organized because I thrive in chaos. But when you cannot find the file that you need, it's a little bit bad. So I actually have folders organized where I do, hey, here's like deer cat vinyl sitting, deer cat vinyl standing. This is part of your question about how do you also communicate and be organized with communication. That's also part of why it's really important to find a manufacturer that works well with you. This is a little on my manufacturer, but you shouldn't have to go and nudge them all the time. That's, to me, a bad sign, right? You shouldn't be momming them. They should be able to hold their own. That's why you want to work with them, right? So a lot of times the manufacturers that ended up liking are the ones who are like, hey, we have this is gonna come in this, is this okay? And it's a very organic, where they'll be like, hey, we haven't heard anything about the notes. It's been 3 days. And I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I have the notes, right? So it's a very organic relationship. I know people who are really, really scrappy, even scrappier than me. But I think whatever is easiest for you, right? And it shouldn't be where you feel like you have to shame someone into like responding to you. I would say that's a bad manufacturer. You don't want to work with them. Just like a friendship. You don't always want to be the one reaching out to the friend and telling them, hey, you haven't talked to me, what's up, are you okay? That kind of thing, right? It should be the type of manufacturer that it lowers your stress, does not increase your stress. Because making a product is already going to be stressful enough for you. But that is how I do it, and I have forced myself to label my product files, everything as version 1, version 2. No more finals. Yeah, but I hope that helps. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for attending. I'm so happy you guys stayed for all of it. Those are wonderful questions. I will be going back to my booth. I am 118. I am all the way against the left wall by Stuart Ings. You'll see all the deer cat stuff. I will be sitting at my booth for a bit. I will be open for questions or if you want to talk more. Thank you guys so much.